I was part of a electric blues band based on Tyneside, which was called the Downtown Faction. And we used to play Chicago-style blues influenced by, originally the Rolling Stones, and then John Mayall, Muddy Waters, of course, Howling Wolf, Paul Butterfield Band, and carved out quite a niche for ourselves on the Tyneside scene doing that. But as happens, the tastes change. The blues kind of fell out of favour in favour of more, I suppose, proggy type stuff. So we rethought our style to a more of a folk blues kind of thing, doing Woody Guthrie and Leadbelly songs, things like that, and started going around the folk clubs. And that's where we ran into a chap called Alan Hull, who had his own folk club that he ran on Sunday nights in the Rex Hotel, Whitley Bay. And we played a couple of songs there. He invited us back to play another time. We already knew Alan, or knew of him, because he'd been in quite a famous Tyneside band called The Chosen Few that had a couple of singles out on Pie Records in the 1960s. He was a very prolific writer, songwriter, and one of the reasons he had the folk club was as a vehicle to perform his own songs. But one thing led to another, and we ended up joining forces with him. So we became, first of all, Alan Hull and Brethren. We'd changed our name to Brethren by this time to give it more of a kind of a folky sound. And if we'd got the gig, we were Brethren with Alan Hull. If he'd got the gig, it was Alan Hull and Brethren.
This was 1968, 69, around that time, was it?
Yes, that's exactly then, yes. And we were taken up by Charisma Records in London. We got a record contract with them. We started recording our first album, Nicely Out of Tune, in 1970. And then halfway through the recording, somebody said, hang on a minute, there's a band in America called Brethren, and they're going to be huge. You'll have to change your name. So we racked our brains and thought, couldn't come up with anything that everybody liked. One day we were sitting with our producer, the record producer, and somebody just mentioned that they'd been up to Lindisfarne at the weekend for a day out. And Lindisfarne, for those who don't know, is the name of an island off the Northumbrian coast, also called Holy Island. Although I have to say there's nothing particularly holy about the band, but I digress. But somebody mentioned the name Lindisfarne, and John, the producer, said, "What's that? What did you just say?" And we said, "Well, Lindisfarne, it's a holy island." And he said, "That's the name. That's the name you should go for, because it's unusual. It's got a good sound to it. It's to do with where you come from." So we were a bit dumbstruck at first. You know, we thought it was a bit like calling yourself Melton Mowbray or something like that. Common sense prevailed, and we got to like the name, and I have to say it's served us very well.
It certainly has, yeah.
Last half century, yeah.
So around that time of formation, the lineup, you mentioned Alan Hull, was it Ray Jackson with Simon Cowell and Ray Laidlaw and yourself?
That's right, yeah. That was the original five that recorded Meet Me on the Corner that we've just heard, and recorded the first three albums. Once
you changed your name and Charisma came in, the band really took off, and you had success not overnight, but almost immediately, wasn't it?
Well, the first album and the first single, the first two singles from it, were very well received by the press, and we had a growing following playing live. We did the college circuit quite a lot. We did a lot of clubs, a few festivals. We've got a bit of a reputation as being a festival band. But nothing from the first album really, I would say, set the charts on fire until we did the second album, Fog on the Tyne, and Meet Me on the Corner was the first single released from that. And it went top 5. On the back of that, Charisma re-released Lady Eleanor from the first album. That went top 10 as well. After that, we had All Fall Down, which from the third album, Dingley Dell, which didn't do as well. It was sort of lower reaches of the 20, I think. But by that time, we were pretty well established. We were touring nationally, and had some quite notable support acts like Genesis, for example.
And never heard of them.
And toured the States, toured Australia in the company of Slade and Status Quo, went to Japan, Generally had a bit of a rip-roaring time, really.